He can still write a verse,
Yeah.
but his verse always has drug dealer references in him.
Yeah.
When he's admitted to being a correctional officer.
Okay.
In order to be a correctional officer, you have to not have any criminal history.
That's right.
What kind of rich nigga cut his own grass? Why you out there cutting your own grass? You're trying to save money? You don't want to pay for the lawn to get cut, huh?
Let me ask you
The
this.
AC broken in the motherfucker.
Let me ask you this.
So you got Rick Ross on Joe and Jada.
You know, Rick Ross not smacking nobody. He up there talking
For
about
sure,
smacking somebody.
smacking 50.
Just imagine if I had the chance to slap 50 Cent with this shit right here.
Come on, man.
Yo,
Family show, Ross.
No, I'm just saying. Just imagine that. That's a blessing.
Then you got him dissing the G Unit.
They had the game in the chokehold, and then
they flop.
man, they
G
invited me
Unit.
to the no.
It was G Unit. It was them
And my man Murder on there.
with the dark cheek. What's that nigga name? Uncle Murder. That nigga cheek's way darker than his forehead.
But to me, Rick Ross jokes is getting dry. Murder, clean my boat. Yayo, mow my lawn. Don't care about none of that.
You know, Rick Ross not smacking nobody. He up there talking
For
about
sure,
smacking somebody.
smacking
We
50.
saw you in Canada, brother. We saw you run on your peoples and all that. We know you not about that. We seen you run
Listen,
on your people.
be-
We know you
be-
soft, my brother.
Be-
Yo, Ross, stop. I'm a Wimbayaya nigga.
Yo,
You know
yo,
what I'm saying?
Wimbayaya.
Rick Ross walked on to the Joe and Jada podcast, held up a diamond ring he claims is worth $1 million, and told the world he'd love the chance to slap 50 Cent with it. That's where we are in 2025. 15 years into this beef, and Ross is still finding new ways to keep it alive. Let's break down exactly what happened, who piled on, and why the internet ended up clowning Ross harder than anyone expected. To understand why this moment hit the way it did, you need the 15-second version of this beef. Rick Ross and 50 Cent have been going at each other since around 2008, when 50 exposed Ross's past as a corrections officer, a fact Ross had been hiding behind a drug dealer persona for years. Since then, it's been diss tracks, interviews, lawsuits, Instagram trolling, and enough back and forth to fill a documentary. But the dynamic has always been the same. 50 Cent stays relatively unbothered, treats it like entertainment, and Ross keeps throwing punches trying to get a reaction. That context matters for everything that happened on the Joe and Jada podcast. Ross showed up to the podcast, and at some point the conversation drifted toward rappers who step out of line. Ross started getting animated, talking about what he'd do to any rapper who came at him wrong. Then he held up his hand, a massive diamond ring on full display, and said, just imagine if I had the chance to slap 50 Cent with this right here. The hosts reacted, the room got loud, and Ross, realizing he'd said the name out loud, tried to walk it back. He said he wasn't talking about 50 Cent, that he was thinking about some old school rappers from back in the day who had the game on lock and then fell off. He said he didn't want to say who specifically, but the damage was already done because the hosts had caught it, the cameras had caught it, and the internet was about to catch it too. Then Ross made it worse. In trying to clarify who he was actually talking about, he started going at Uncle Murda directly, mocking his appearance, making jokes about his complexion, saying his cheeks were way darker than his forehead. So now Ross had gone from denying he said 50's name to pivoting into a specific personal attack on another person live on camera. The hosts couldn't contain it. The clip was already being clipped and posted before the episode even ended. Now, here's where the context behind this moment becomes important. Because Ross wasn't just throwing random shots. This was happening while his tour was already taking heat. Fans had been pointing out for weeks that Ross's upcoming tour dates were not selling the way you'd expect from someone of his reputation. Venues had empty sections. Promoters were running buy one, get one 50% off deals just to fill seats. In hip-hop, your ticket sales are part of your credibility, same as your streaming numbers and your chart. When your shows aren't selling and you're simultaneously on a podcast joking about slapping 50 Cent, people start connecting dots. Some fans were openly saying Ross was picking fights specifically to generate press and drive interest in dates that weren't moving. He also took shots at Drake in the same general stretch, saying Drake wasn't on his level and that his numbers looked inflated or fake, which added to the growing sense that Ross was throwing punches in multiple directions at once, hoping one of them would land loud enough to shift the conversation away from empty seats. 50 Cent saw all of it and responded the way he almost always does, publicly, casually, and with maximum damage. He went on social media and wrote that he'd heard Ross was doing buy one get one 50% off because nobody wanted to come to his shows. He said maybe he should help buy the remaining tickets himself, just so there could be more empty seats during the performance. Then he addressed the Drake comment. He said that was a bitter, washed-up career crying for attention and help. He signed off saying he needed to get back to work before he got carried away by this fool, with a laughing emoji at the end. The response was calculated. 50 didn't match Ross's energy with anger, he matched it with amusement. He treated the whole thing like it was mildly entertaining background noise while he was busy doing other things. That response framing is a weapon in itself. When you respond to someone like they're an inconvenience rather than a real threat, you're telling the audience exactly how much weight you're putting on the situation. The internet reacted accordingly. Comments flooded in saying Ross probably woke up smiling just because he finally got 50 to acknowledge him. Because that's been the running joke in this beef for years, that Ross needs a 50's attention more than 50 needs his. But 50 wasn't the only one who responded. Tony Yayo, who has been in 50's corner since the G-Unit days, jumped in and added his own commentary. He addressed the original podcast clip, pointed out what was obvious to everyone watching, that Ross absolutely said 50's name and then tried to act like he didn't, and came in with his own shots from the sideline. Tony Yayo has always been the one in the crew who says what 50 doesn't need to bother saying directly, and he fulfilled that role here. Uncle Murda also fired back after Ross came at him specifically on the podcast. The complexion jokes hadn't gone unnoticed, and Murda made it clear he wasn't letting that go quietly. He responded with his own comments about Ross, including noting what everyone in the culture already knows, that Ross running in Canada was on camera, that people have footage, and that the tough guy image Ross projects doesn't match the footage that exists of him in real situations. The Canada reference has followed Ross for years because of a well-documented incident where he allegedly ran from a confrontation, and Murda brought it back up in full. Murda also referenced the 2008 BET Awards backstage situation, where multiple people have claimed Ross's demeanor was very different from what he projects in interviews. He said Ross had his whole crew with him and was still moving cautiously in an environment where tension was running high. He wasn't saying this for the first time. This story has been floating in hip-hop circles for a while, but repeating it in this moment, while Ross was actively out here talking about slapping people with million-dollar rings, made the contrast hit harder. The buy one, get one ticket story also picked up additional momentum after all of this, because now it wasn't just a footnote. It became part of the full picture people were painting of Ross in this moment. You've got a guy who isn't selling shows the way he used to, who's taking shots at 50 Cent, Drake, and Uncle Murda within the same week, who tried to walk back a comment the entire internet already heard him make, and who's now catching return fire from multiple directions simultaneously. Some people watching gave Ross credit for having energy and being willing to stay in these conversations. Others felt like the whole thing exposed a gap between the persona and the reality. There's a version of Rick Ross, the biggest boss energy, the car washes and Winged franchises and Maybach music branding, that still commands real respect. But the version of Rick Ross who shows up on a podcast and grabs a ring and talks about fantasy slapping and then tries to pretend he wasn't talking about who he was clearly talking about is a different vibe. It doesn't quite match. 50 Cent has been in this beef long enough to know exactly how to play his role. He shows up when it's convenient, delivers something that lands, and goes back to doing PowerBook press tours and trolling people on Instagram about their business decisions. He doesn't need the beef to stay relevant. Ross, to a lot of people watching, appears to need it more. Whether Ross fires back again or lets this round breathe for a while, the pattern is already set. This beef has outlasted albums, lawsuits, label deals, and streaming eras. Every few months, something reignites it, and the whole cycle runs again. This time, 50 got the laugh. Tony Yayo got his shots in, Uncle Murda is in his feelings, and Ross is out here with a $1 million ring that he very publicly wanted to use on someone he very publicly claimed he wasn't thinking about. The internet saw it, the hosts on the podcast saw it, and 50 Cent definitely saw it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did 50 Cent win this round, or do you think Ross is playing a longer game? And do you think this beef ever actually ends?